Hello, this is a Christmas lecture. I'm going to go straight into it. I got some good images. This is the Know of Trotty, and this is part one of the Tuesday and Wednesday Christmas lecture. So this is 23rd and 24th of December. So without further ado, Merry Christmas. Hope you're gonna have a great time. And so part one and two, and then I'll have another recording out next week, which will also be pre-recorded. So let's just go straight into this. And anyone watching this on YouTube, this is part of my live classes that I do 50 weeks of the year, and I do 2 around Christmas time that are pre-recorded, and these are the ones that are pre-recorded. So it's great to be taking us to Orkney, and that's where we are. And let's see where we are there, and there we go, and bingo. So I'm just double checking that this is working right, and I find sometimes doing these types of presentations not the same as I would usually do, because you've got interaction, and it's different. So let's just make sure. I'm just making sure that this is actually recording, because I remember I did a class once, and for a whole hour people were watching the same image throughout the entire class, and there was like 5 people in on this class. When we got to the questions at the end, somebody said it would have been really nice to have seen more images. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, we'd only seen 1 image all evening. So, because they didn't tell me. This is the nose of Trotty, and this is on Orkney, the Orkney Islands. So anyone who doesn't know where the Orkney Islands are, it's a series of islands which are north, 45-minute sort of ferry, north-east tip of Scotland, and you've got these islands, and then further on from there you've got the Shetlands, but these are the Orkney Isles, an archipelago of islands. So I'm going to get my notes up here. Everything's working fine, I see, and everybody can hear me, I guess. So I was looking at this and I go, wow, this is absolutely brilliant. The Nose of Trotty, a Bronze Age cemetery and Neolithic settlement site. The information that we're sharing today is fairly up to date. It's care of the excavators at the Ness of Brodgar. This is near the Ness of Brodgar. And this is a site that I sent some of my students out to see once, whilst I took another group of students when I was in Orkney somewhere else that day. But Bill will know what I'm talking about with that one. So it is a large cemetery site, a Bronze Age cemetery, and Neolithic settlement. So it's a quote that we're going to start off with. It's at Hunterscarth Harry, which is mainland of Orkney, which we're going to show you. There we go. So when you go to Orkney, the light green area is called the mainland. Yeah, mainland Orkney, and all these other islands, for example, that one there is Rousey. That big one there is called Hoy. That one there is called South Ronaldsay, and it's being connected to the mainland now. So, and obviously you've got all the other islands, Stronsay, you've got Westray, you've got North Ronaldsay, you've got loads of little islands there. Most of them are habited as well. So anyway, back to this quote. There we go, that quote there. So the reason why I'm doing this today is the first archaeological excavation on Orkney. So we've talked a lot about Orkney in the past. So first archaeological excavation ever on Orkney in 1858. There'd been lots of excavations there, right, by people who weren't archaeologists, but this is the first proper archaeological excavation, 1858. So a cyst was found covered by a large flat stone, yeah, at this site. On either side of the kist, 2 upright stones. Now, what the magic of technology is that we can scroll through all these images and we're thinking, well, what is Karl on about? We're scrolling through these and we're thinking, there, right? So what they're describing in 1858, these are the more recent excavations that they've been doing. And the description there is this. So this description from 1858. So there we go. So a kist is in the middle. On either side of the kist, 2 upright stones. You can clearly see the 2 upright stones, which is that one there and that one there. Yeah, so that's what we've got. Placed at right angles to the stones forming its sides and 5 or 6 foot high. There we go. So obviously I think we're doing that from the base of the kist, not as the height is there. Rose nearly to the surface of the earthen mound, covering the whole. In one corner lay 4 discs of thin gold. And again, the magic of, in hindsight, that discs of gold. The discs are about 3 inches in diameter. Remember, there's 4 discs pierced by a circular hole in the center and ornamented. Now, this was published by Magnus Spence in the Old Law publication, published in 1908. So what we're talking about with this landscape is an array of mounds, and there's the Know itself, number 1. And obviously this big mound, lots of little mounds within the landscape. Really fascinating piece of archaeology and in-depth sort of landscape of great change. So sitting above the area of marshland in Orkney's west mainland, again, there we go, the western part of the island, are the Nose of Trotty, a Bronze Age barrow cemetery that is the only one of its kind in northern Britain and the largest between here and southern England. So what they're talking about when they're talking about being, the largest one in that part of Scotland, so if you go to somewhere like Wiltshire, there's loads of these. There's thousands of these things, these burial mounds. But in Orkney, in one area, is a sort of burial ground. They're quite rare, so that's the point. So until the early part of this century, this current century, the 2000s, the Nose were best known for the discovery of prehistoric gold and amber ornamentation. The point to be made with that is that, bit more gold there. That's as published. Remember, there's 4 of those discs, and there's amber beads. When I actually went to the site myself first, it was in 2013. Martin Carruthers basically said gold is extremely rare on Orkney. So, but in 2005, archaeological evidence suggests the highly visible Bronze Age activity was preceded at least 1,600 years before by a Neolithic settlement. This was what's fascinating with the site, that you've got a burial site which is occupying a Neolithic site. So sort of continuity, Tim Ingold, there's the archaeology. So again, keep dashing back. This is the sort of burial ground of the landscape. So, but in 2005, archaeological evidence suggests a highly visible Bronze Age activity. They wanted to know more. So presently the barrow cemetery consists of 16 barrows positioned in 2 rows at the bottom of this parish known as Harray, which is there. Yeah. And again, this is a vital, important piece of the archaeological network of the Ness of Brodgar, for example. So when again we think about the archaeology and where you see fit to think of the archaeology today, which is this sort of burial landscape from these images, the Nose of Trotty are one of Orkney's earliest groups of Bronze Age barrows. So you think of Orkney as being full of Neolithic archaeology, but this site itself, unique, 16 mounds, probably loads and loads more, probably hundreds of them. So geophysical survey in 2001 suggests the cemetery was one larger group containing more of these mounds and many more impressive sort of power and play of interesting structures of a barrow and burial context from the Bronze Age. So when again you're talking about the Bronze Age, sort of fix that in our minds, you're talking about the Bronze Age for over 4,500 years ago. So that's what we're talking about. So obviously beyond that you've got the Neolithic period, which obviously going back to 5,000 years ago. So when we're thinking about these mounds and sort of trying to understand the context, and again we've got lots of these lovely images, so we sort of start pounding through these, the bigger ones themselves, bigger, more instructive ones, so ranging in diameter and height from 9 meters diameter, like these big ones, by just over 60 centimeters in height, and there's some 19 meters in diameter and nearly 3 meters high. So again, when I love the sense of Orcadian archaeology, and anyone who's been to my classes will know that from the way I'm talking about Orcadian archaeology. And it's again, I said this at the beginning, it's so difficult to treat myself to looking at this tonight without an audience to sort of rebound off, but we're not doing too badly. So this is part of a plan from 2016. So as far as we know, the cemetery remained undisturbed until 1858, when Orcadian antiquarian George Petrie reported that the landowner had opened the largest barrow in March. And you would argue that when you look at Orkney, not too far away from here is Skara Brae, which was found which was found in a storm, right? And so when we think about Skara Brae, I think the dates for Skara Brae about 1850. I can be stand corrected, but they weren't really doing any archaeological work there at that stage. So this is the first Orcadian archaeological work in 1858. So George Petrie, not Flinders, well, Petrie, P-E-T-R-I-E. This isn't Flinders Petrie, this is George Petrie. Petrie's very brief account was delayed, and eventually it was offered as a presentation and published. Digging from the top of the 9-meter mound, okay, it's a really tall mound as it is, you know, it's really, really, really impressive there. And as I said, you know, this is these are, some of these are quite big. So when I see 9-meter mound, it's a 9-meter diameter, at that stage 3.6 meters high. So obviously it's a lot flatter now. And one of the things that fascinated people was when they were excavating, they were looking at something which was more akin to the Neolithic period. This is at Mid-Howe, but when they were excavating, they thought, what's going on here? Is this part of an earlier monument? What is this? Is this? And when they were excavating this, they found in this kist, obviously this Bronze Age kist probably may have been set in a Neolithic monument, and obviously finding bones and finding these types of objects, you know, the amber beads, it was something which was, you know, massively important. And 4 of these golden discs, it's to be remembered that, you know, when people are excavating, that at this period, people are not usually doing it in the modern day scientific way. So when these items were recovered and now reside in National Museum Scotland in Edinburgh, not in Orkney, George Petrie added, it is probable that a number of beads have been lost among the debris which got into the grave. He was right, but more on that when we look at the later work. When we think about the gold, the discs were made of paper-thin sheets of gold, embossed in concentric circles of geometric designs. And the largest of the undamaged discs had a diameter of 76 millimeters and a sort of a whole centimeter hole in the middle, to sort of give you an idea. They may have been thought to be like buttons or conical type buttons, for clothing. So although very similar to examples found in Wessex in southern England, the lesser quality of the work had led to the suggestion that they may have been copies of other work elsewhere, as well as probable clothing adornments. Among the 15 amber artifacts were plates and beads from a Bronze Age sort of necklace. So there were other things that we're thinking of, and not necessarily specifically Orcadian in design. And it's said that maybe people had travelled from Stonehenge, for example, with this type of art, with these types of artifacts. And Stonehenge is a massive 1,120 miles away from Orkney, but that's something else. So given the wear on the surviving beads, it has been proposed the necklace was old by the time it was placed in the burial kist. And it makes me think again that people are not always burying people in the past with the best of the best. They're more like hand-me-down things that are being buried, and obviously it's time to return them to the earth. What we cannot say is whether it was new to the owner that was actually buried with them. So obviously an old artifact given to somebody, or it was buried with the person that, or it's just heirlooms passed down the generations. These types of things that they did in the Neolithic / Bronze Age period. So it is not possible to say whether the necklace was complete when it went into the kist or deposited as broken fragments. And again, thinking about this, the special nature of the site, we look at a view like this, and the landscape would have been very, very different back then. It wouldn't have been marshy like this. There would probably been a lot more bushes and rare trees today in Orkney, but not so rare back at this time. So one of the things that we're talking about is that they went back to survey the site, the survey the know, and this is an extremely large mound. And this itself, if we look at what can be described as a topographical survey, more akin to LiDAR, which is this. In July 2005, almost 150 years after the kist was opened, archaeologists from the University of Highlands and Islands returned to the nose. Even had they not found gold and amber as they did so in 1858, it's what we do find when people excavate sites like this. They find the fascination of the archaeology with stuff that had not been known about before. So they excavated in the locality of the mound that had been excavated previous, and these are the two tops of those. These two tops of those stones that we mentioned earlier on as part of the kist they excavated there. So what they were trying to do when they were excavating here was to, in 2005, 150 or so years that the kist had been opened, and well, maths is slightly off there, but that's what my notes is saying. But even what we're talking about, the nose of Trotty, presumably the Bronze Age archaeology, and what they did was look at the spoil of the archaeology. So the one thing that they found when they were excavating the spoil from the archaeology after it had been backfilled was Victorian artifacts. So what had happened is, obviously, as they were excavating, they may have had a china cup or something, and it broke, and it just got in the way of the soil, and it just went back into the archaeology to cover up this piece of archaeology. You can see a lot of jumble of rocks there as well. So we have no idea, for example, how the original excavator found the kist. Were the contents sitting in an empty chamber, the stone lid forming a tight seal, or was it already full of debris? We don't know. This is the problem with archaeological work in the past. It's difficult to understand what the archaeology is all about when previous people did archaeological work. Remember, this is, if we want to look at the time span now, this is, let me work out my maths here. This is 100 and it's 170 odd years later. So the goal of the excavation more recently was to recover abandoned human remains and secure a radiocarbon date for the burial. So this is the point. When you're working on a site like this and you're working in from an earlier, and you're working into an earlier archaeological excavation, what earlier excavators have done, they've not recorded everything properly, or they've not kept everything, or they've seen things as not being important, which we would do so now. So finding bones from this archaeology is key to sort of getting radiocarbon dates and key to sort of getting to know the site a lot better. And this is what all this is about, sort of learning more and understanding more about something that we haven't got the full picture at by 2000, but obviously more excavations mean that you're able to learn a lot more in more recent times. So despite the difficulties of re-excavating, the 2005 excavation revealed the extent and sophistication of Barrow itself. Overlying the kist was a thick capping of subsoil mixed with large slabs and midden material. So obviously this had been a site that had been developed over quite some time, and the barrow had also been raised on top of a deliberately sculptured natural mound. So when you are thinking about the no there on the right, and you're thinking, you know, that's sort of what they're saying, is that there was a sort of a natural pillow of earth there, and they developed the mound into a Bronze Age barrow. There's no doubt that the burial mound would have been striking in the landscape, appearing as a conical mound on top of an earthen platform. And obviously the problem is, over time it's been weathered away and damaged. The original excavation shaft located, the painstaking work was to naturally get into what was there before, and every shovelful was sieved and produced a quantity of cremated bones. So when they were excavating the site in 1858, they just discarded the bones into the spall heap. So when they backfilled the site, they put the bones back in, which is obviously what the archaeologists are looking at today. So subsequent radiocarbon dating placed the inhumation, the burial itself, well within the Bronze Age. It's a bit of a wide range, about 2130 to 1770 years BC. As well as the bone fragments, a cache of lost Bronze Age artifacts, including 3 tiny fragments of gold, were recovered. George Petrie was correct about lost beads, as well as the gold. The re-excavation produced another 5 triangular amber beads and a rectangular object from a necklace. So things that had been lost, not recorded or lost or discarded, like the amber beads, are being found in a modern context. Maybe the excavations in the past weren't really interested in the beads, or they missed them, but they've been found today. So the re-excavation allowed the archaeologists to view what George Petrie had presumably witnessed in 1858, or maybe the summer of 1857, seeing the kist firsthand. The parallels between its architecture and that of something earlier was striking, if not slightly puzzling at first. So what we're talking about, that there is a Neolithic site. That's on Rousey, not this site. But what they're saying is, if you look at these uprights in a kist burial, in a large sort of, not a kist burial, a stored cairn in Rousey, and what that's Neolithic. So what they've done in the Bronze Age, they've actually decided that they're going to retain these features, which was part of the stalled cairn from the Neolithic period. And what they were going to then do is in the Bronze Age, so they dig into this mound, and then what they do is they put the kiss burial in, which is the guy is excavating there, and that's the kiss burial. So the kiss itself is just under 1.5 meters long by, if you want to be precise, 0.64 meters wide. So over half a meter wide. So big enough to get somebody in. So they're saying this was unusually large. So the two, and those stones there are known as orthostats, Osolithic stones, standing stones. At the centre of the long sides and at right angles to them were very reminiscent of the uprights that divided the interiors of Orkney in regards to Neolithic landscape. So what we are seeing is we're seeing reuse of the archaeology, a sense of in the Neolithic period there it's being quarried by the Bronze Age people, and then likewise the Iron Age people are sort of reusing Bronze Age sites. One thing what we're saying is that a little bit further north of this site, that within this landscape, they found Neolithic houses, right? And this is really, really interesting because the Neolithic houses date back to over 5,000 years ago. So excavating within this landscape, within this burial landscape, which was a burial landscape, but before was a habitational landscape. So the building was constructed some time between, they got 3,400 years BC, which is a massive 5,400 years BC, which is, you know, in the period of the Neolithic, well in there. So the different, and what you can see is this absolutely massive, this massive wall area, yeah, which is actually a building, right? This is the building. This is the shape of the building that they excavated, yeah. And what you've got there is a fireplace in the middle, which is similar to the kiss that we've just seen. So when they were excavating, so this is one of the houses. So they're saying, you know, this is one of the phases. And what they're saying, that this is a big house, a really big house, a 9-meter long house by just under 5 meters wide. So massive. So what we've got, you've got the outer walls, which are rubble and clay. And the building was slightly smaller than the early Neolithic houses, which we find on the island of Paparestre, which is some of the northernmost islands of the Neolithic landscape within the Orkney archipelago. So what we're talking about is that this archaeology is habitational archaeology. It was eventually dominated by the likes of a burial landscape. So you've got a nice fire pit in the middle. So what they're then saying is that, so this is the early phase, this is the earlier stuff. And then as the site itself, there you go, what's happening is getting more complex. So more stuff is being built up. And what they're saying is that it's almost as if the house is getting a little bit smaller in a later period. So it's very likely that this starts to sort of probably more contemporary with the likes of Skara Brae, which is also being occupied roughly in about 3,300 years ago. But this is obviously the next phase of this settlement and how it develops. So obviously within archaeology, what we do see is that, you know, things change, and this is what they're saying, sort of these are the Cairn type sites, and which are in relation to this Neolithic site, and then nearby is the burial monuments in the landscape. But that's obviously to do with the wonderful Bronze Age, where you've got a burial landscape. So what you've got is within the archaeology, you're seeing a burial landscape and these buildings, a settlement. And one thing about the Nesa Brodga is that what we will be seeing when they're excavating the Nesa Brodga, we will be seeing more work in the summer, obviously as part of Time Team. So if we go back to this early phase drawing, which looks much more like a building than the other two illustrations, Neolithic settlement patterns throughout Orkney, it seems that we know that this was probably part of a nice village, a settlement. This is what we're finding. Obviously, lots of sites are being altered and changed and reused for varying different purposes. And it's always very useful to excavate sites like this to sort of get a picture and a relationship between the living and the dead in a way, and obviously keeping the living nearby. As I said earlier on, Mound 1 at the Knowe of Trotty, where you've got this sort of mound directly based on a glacier, and there they are excavating. It was a great opportunity for them to excavate at the site, being that obviously resources are quite sort of not as available as they used to be in archaeology. And I remember looking at this landscape when I went to Orkney, where you've got sort of a burial landscape, somewhere you've got a habitational landscape, obviously constant changes. And there's so much to see when you go to see the archaeology of Orkney. Oh, there's a book I've just signed. And what I'd like to say is I just wanted to give you this as a little sort of presentation today. So this is part 1. So I'll send this out to everybody now, and hopefully you've got something out of this, a sort of a little bit of presentation. So the next part 2, which I'll do to follow up this evening, will be looking at the archaeology of Christmas. So thank you for watching this, and part 2 to come up very shortly, and we'll end this recording. I'm just going to see if I don't have any stuff online, I don't think, so let's just sort of let's end that. Next, part 2 coming up, so I'll share this to everybody and see how that goes. Thank you.